try it. See if that works. Okay, welcome everyone here tonight to our first lesson of the study of the book of Isaiah. And I want to just welcome everyone here tonight. I'm Steve Sheik. I'm the congregation leader at Tree of Life Houston we meet at in Katy, so it's Tree of Life Messianic Congregation in Katy, Texas. And this is just an extension or an outreach of our normal services. So let's go ahead and begin with the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctifies us with his commandments and commands us to engross ourselves in words of Torah. All right, so as I said, we're starting the book of Isaiah tonight, and I think it's going to be a good study for us. Of all the, and I'm just going to start with an introduction that was written by the man who's that is we're going to be using his textbook. So he had a great introduction. So I thought, well, I'll just use his introduction. So let me go ahead and read that, and then we'll jump into the rest of it. It says, of all the books in the Old Testament, Isaiah is perhaps the richest. Its literary grandeur is unequaled. Its scope is unparalleled. The breadth of its view of God is unmatched. In so many ways, it is a book of superlatives. Thus, it is no wonder that Isaiah is the most quoted prophet in the New Testament, and along with Psalms and Deuteronomy, one of the most frequently cited of all Old Testament books. Study of it is an opportunity for unending inspiration and challenge. Were the book of Isaiah merely a monument to Hebrew religion, it would be a most impressive monument indeed. In fact, it comes to us as a word from God, a revelation of the inevitable conflict between divine glory and human pride, of the self-destruction which that pride must bring, and the grace of God in restoring that destroyed humanity to himself. To read the book with open eyes of the Spirit is to see oneself, at times all too clearly, but also to see a God whose holiness is made irresistible by his love. All right, and that was by Mr. Oswalt, who is one of the books that I'm using for this study tonight. There's probably about 4 or 5 that I've been reading to get ready for this class each week. So a lot of reading. So before we can actually get into the study of any one of the books actually in the Tanakh or the Old Testament, I think it's necessary to understand the historical and the cultural backdrop of the book. And so we've got here just a general outline of Isaiah with major themes and time frames. And this is very similar to the outlines that I've used in other studies. So if you've been with us in other studies, you recognize the format of this, and it's pretty close with what we will be studying. And then the next 3 slides here list the important dates for the book of Isaiah. Now, these dates that are up here are all like 745 BCE. Okay, so all these dates are BC. And these names, if you're a history person, you will understand that Tiglath-Pileser was the monarch, the emperor of Assyria, and Uzziah was the king of Judah, and so Isaiah began his ministry there, and then it just goes on down with the various dates, and some of these dates we'll come back to, but you can leave these, they'll be in the outline every week, so that you will be able to look at that and just to see where we are with the lesson, and it just gives you a good summary of those dates and of the events and what day they are, because it always helps me to know where we are in history when we're studying something like this. All right. And so, major things like here, 586, Jerusalem falls to Nebuchadnezzar. But, by that time, Isaiah's been dead for 100 years. So why does that matter that we're doing stuff that Isaiah's been dead for 100 years? Well, because he prophesied it, and there it happened exactly like he said. So that makes him a prophet and not just a purveyor of words, like some people who say they're prophets and then nothing comes true, or it comes just false as it can be, or doesn't happen at all, and so they're not much of a prophet in that case. Now here is this particular slide here is it's a simple timeline showing approximately the 50 to 60 years of Isaiah's time as a prophet, and it depends on who you study, who you read, and so forth, as to how many years Isaiah was actually active as a prophet. And when you're talking about something that was 2,800 years ago, it's sometimes difficult to ascertain an exact date for some things. And for Isaiah, that's the truth there, because we don't know exactly when he was born and when he died. I was reading one commentator, one scholar, I don't know if it's a scholar, historian, whatever, somebody that wrote a book, and he said that, or a website, he had a website, said that Isaiah was born at 800 BCE and he died at 700 BCE, and he lived 100 years. And so I find that, that one was a kind of a stretch, but I could see that where he could have been born, somewhere around, it wouldn't be 730, because that would have been 740, something like that. That's when he began his ministry, and so if he was about 30 years old when he began his ministry, that would have been having been born somewhere around 790 BCE, and or 770 BCE. So anyway, some have speculated that he was a priest, and then the Jewish tradition says that he was of a royal family. We'll talk about that in a minute. But if he was a priest, then he would not have started his ministry until he was about 30 years old. So being as that would the case if he started ministry at 30 years old and he started it at 740 BCE, he would have been born around 770 BCE. And so, and then this just shows the length of his years there. And then we talk about, some of his prophecies are over here in, Judah being conquered here. And that was 100 years after he died. And then, 70 years later, then Cyrus conquers Babylon, and the return from exile begins. That's about 170 years after Isaiah. And then it just goes on. Well, the Septuagint was written somewhere between 300 and 200 BCE, and then then Yeshua, the Messiah, was born around 4 to 6 BCE, something like that. So that gives you kind of a timeline on that. So, and this book is divided into 3 major divisions, actually. And so because of the way that this is divided, it's led to all sorts of ideas from people as to who the author really is. And they say, well, certainly chapters 1 to 39 were written by Isaiah the prophet. But then they say, well, the second and third periods, they happen long after Isaiah's death. And so, there's because he was active from about 740 to 701 BC. And then you had the other ones here. This part here is where the Babylonian Empire comes into play from 605 to 539. During that time, of course, we know that Jerusalem fell. And this was a time when Ezekiel was active as the prophet to Judah. And then later on, then we have this period of time here where the Persian Empire went. And that could be from 539 to even 400 BCE or maybe even 500. It just depends on how you wanted, what things you wanted to emphasize. But this gives you a good idea of how the chapters fall into place in history. And so certainly 539 is where the exiles start returning back to Israel. So, all right. Now I wanted to show you a map, of course, that you know how I am with maps. And this was the Assyrian Empire, which that coincided with the first portion of Isaiah. And they show this here as Jerusalem being conquered. Well, Jerusalem wasn't conquered, but just about everything around. I mean, this part right around Jerusalem, they didn't conquer, but everything else that they did, the Assyrians did rule over that part of the world. Okay, and then the Babylonians came along, and they expanded a little bit here. And again, these are all approximations, and they show here how more correctly, right here in the middle around Jerusalem, the territory or the nation of Judah, the southern kingdom actually of Israel, and that shows that a little bit more correctly. And then over here, the Medo-Persian Empire at this point was not the major empire that we're going to be looking at in this study. Then we have the Medo-Persian Empire that conquered the Babylonians finally, and this was their stretch. Now they had a much larger territory, as you can see here, and I thought about going through all these the names of the various kings and emperors and all that kind of stuff, but that really doesn't. It's not important to the study of our lessons of Isaiah. So I just decided, well, we'll just forego that, and the history nerds among you can go look that stuff up if you wanted to. All right, so this and I did want to point out though that only the first 39 chapters of Isaiah they corresponded to this Assyrian Empire here. Okay, and then between the chapter 39 and chapter 40, there's a 100-year interlude or a 100-year gap between that historically. But just so you can remember that, because that's where his prophecies came into play. All right. So, are there any questions or comments before we just start jumping into the scriptures here? Bible, and it's got something to tell us for today, but Isaiah especially is true in that, and that's, it is really the gold standard of Hebraic literature in the Old Testament, and it is the most quoted of all of the most quoted in like the New Testament and so forth. And so I think possibly maybe the Psalms have more, maybe some more quotes, but certainly of the prophets, Isaiah is the most quoted prophet, and certainly the most quoted by Yeshua himself. So I think it's imperative that people that are going to be followers of Yeshua and be serious students of the Bible would need to get really into Isaiah and to understand it. So it says the vision of Isaiah, son of Amoz, which he saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem in the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, king of Judah. Now, this book claims, Isaiah as its author, of course, and his name means the Lord saves, and it summarizes basically the revelation of the book. Obadiah was the only other writing prophet who described his book as a vision. This unusual title, then, it stresses that what Isaiah wrote reflects reality accurately. He saw it, and so the word vision that he saw, he said he saw it in a vision, does not mean that everything that Isaiah wrote is what he saw in one of the more of these, say, a supernatural type vision. Though this vision that he had, it all came from God, of course, and sometimes it just means that Isaiah just had the Holy Spirit working through him, and he could see how things were going. So he had not only the vision, like John the Revelator had the visions, and Paul had the apostle had visions, but he also had an understanding of people and of situations. Now, according to Jewish tradition, Isaiah's father Amoz was not the prophet Amos, was the brother of King Amaziah, and that would have been Uzziah's father, which would have made Isaiah King Uzziah's cousin. So Isaiah ministered in and to the people of Jerusalem and Judah, but he saw them as real Israel, since they lived under the Davidic kings, in contrast to the residents of the northern kingdom of Israel, which they had broken off of the Davidic line when the kingdom split after Solomon. So the four kings that are mentioned here that Isaiah served under, they were, or ministered to, I don't know that he would serve under, but he mentioned them anyway. They ruled from 792 to 686 BCE. All right. So, And his intended audience, of course, was to Jerusalem and Judea, because Assyria had already taken over the northern kingdom, and so that was they were gone. There's no use to prophesy to them, because there's nothing that they could do about it at that point. They had already been defeated. So let's go ahead to this. It says, "Listen, heavens, and hear, earth, for Adonai has spoken. Sons I have raised and brought up, but they have rebelled against me. The ox knows its owner, and the donkey its manger, but Israel does not know. My people do not understand." All right, so Adonai himself, in these two verses, charged the Israelites with their sin. He called the heavens and earth to witness his indictment against his people. Now, his people had not only violated his covenant, but they had violated common decency and good sense as well. Isaiah's references to the Mosaic Covenant were less explicit than, say, what Jeremiah wrote, for example. But both men viewed the covenant, God's covenant, the Mosaic Covenant, as the basis of Israelite life. And so, you would think that it would be unthinkable that children would revolt against a loving father who nurtured them and so forth. And he says, even a stupid donkey, oxen and donkeys know their master, but the Israelites did not realize who cared for them. The Israelites made animals look intelligent. And so in this regard, I was talking to my wife today about this. I said, sometimes it's kind of comical how that the writers of the Bible would use examples that kind of we use to today about people and so forth. And what they're doing is they're saying, Isaiah is saying that the Israelite people are dumber than a donkey, and use whatever word you want to use for a donkey. And so we still use those kind of words today. Someone's a dumb, fill in the blank. And so that kind of language was also in the Bible, trying to make a point about the people. So going ahead here, it says, "Oi, a sinful nation, a people weighed down with iniquity, offspring of evildoers, sons dealing corruptly. They have abandoned Adonai. They have despised Israel's Holy One. They have turned backwards. Where will you be struck again as you stray more and more? The whole head is sick, the whole heart faint. From the foot to the head there is no soundness. Wounds, bruises, and raw sores, not pressed or bandaged, nor softened with oil. Your land is desolate. Your cities are burned with fire. Your fields, strangers devour it in your presence. A desolation overthrown by strangers. So the daughter of Zion is left as a sukkah in a vineyard, as a lodge in a garden of cucumbers, as a besieged city. Unless Adonai Tzvaot had left us a small remnant, we would have been as Sodom, we would have been as Gomorrah. All right, so the prophet, I forgot to turn that, but the prophet amplified God's charge. God had verse 2 and 3, and then Isaiah then had verses 4 to 9 here. He amplified God's charge, and he proved it by referring to Israel's condition. He lamented that Israel's state was a logical outcome of her behavior. it begins with that interjection, oi, or behold, or whoa, and it just of course, in Hebrew and certainly in Yiddish, somebody saying something that is not good, they'll say oi vey, and so it's something that they would hear as a cry of mourning at funerals, and when Isaiah's audience heard these words, images of death would have appeared in their minds, and so God's people had forsaken the Holy One of Israel, the transcendent God who is wholly separate from the frailty and the fitness of finiteness of creation. He created everything, and he's not like a man, like the other religions around them, that where their gods, their little g gods, had the attributes of man with all the foibles of man and so forth. God was not like that, and yet they still got away from him, and in many cases preferred the gods of the Canaanites over the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so as a result of that, Isaiah is saying, you're a sick old man here. You got a headache. You got your heart is weak, and from your head to your toe, you're nothing but a mess. And it's because of the turning your back on God. And so it was they would he's got to be graphic there, that is customary in Isaiah's day for people to, if they had a wound, they'd squeeze the infection out of it, or the liquid, whatever comes out of a wound, and then they would pull the cut together with a bandage and then pour olive oil on it to aid in the healing. And so that's what he's talking about, that sores that are not bound, and then there's no oil in them. So he moved on from describing Israel as a sick and injured body to a desolate and conquered land. And the description, daughter of Zion, emphasizes that God feels, it just shows you what God and how God feels about his wayward people, much like a father feels about his daughter. And those of you that have daughters, how a father feels about his daughter. And he loves her. He's committed to her and her protection, and he'll take all sorts of pains to guard his daughter from evil and danger. And so that's just part of a father. A father to a daughter is taking care of that daughter. So lot of the word there, one of the words that is used in there where Judah had rejected, the word is azab, and that's the same word for divorce. So what Isaiah is saying, that you've divorced your God. You had a union, and then you divorced yourself from that. So then many Israelites families lived in villages. They didn't live out in their fields. They didn't have a little cabin out there in their field, and they worked their field right around there. A lot of them, they would live in the villages for protection, but then they had their fields. They would have to travel or walk out to their fields and what they owned. And they didn't live in the fields, except for when it was harvest time. Once it was harvest time, then they would build a little sukkah, or a shelter in their fields. And it might be a little lean-to, it might be something just to keep the heat out, or the rain out, or the cold, or whatever the season was. And they would stay in those fields while it was harvest, because that's one of those times that once the harvest begins, you can't take off. You have to keep working at it. It's just like the same as it is today. When in this nation, when the wheat comes into, when it is ripe, you'll see the wheat farmers on their combines, and they're going out there 24/7 for however many days it takes to harvest the wheat. Same with corn, beans, whatever the crop is. And when that stuff starts coming into its ripeness, you have to go out there and get it right then. Even in my little garden out there that I have, when things start coming ripe, I can't just say, okay, well, I'll wait until I'm tired today. I'm not going to go and collect my cucumbers today. I'll get them tomorrow. Well, the cucumbers that would have been absolutely perfect today, overnight, can double in size, and they'll go from the little ones that you want for canning to the great big ones that really they've lost their flavor, and there's not much you can do with them if you let them go too long. Squash, the same thing. Beans, not so much with beans, because you can just let them go and you can dry them, but you have to pick them when they're ripe. That's one of the things that Yeshua talked about. The harvest is ready, and the fields are ripe, and there's no workers to go out there and get the harvest. So anyway, that's what the reference here in this scripture is, to people that they would live in their sukkahs. And let's go back to see what it is that they said there. So your daughter of Zion is left as a sukkah in a vineyard, as a lodge in a garden of cucumbers, as a besieged city. So what they're saying there is that they are, number one, they're outside the protection of the city. They're living in temporary shelters. That's certainly not a house. There's probably not a whole lot of privacy in the little sukkah if they're out there in their vineyards, and sanitation would be a little bit more stressful. They would have to go and get water. All sorts of hardships associated with living in a sukkah during harvest time. And so anyway, that's what they were talking about during that. And so then it also talks about that lest the Lord of hosts, the Adonai Svaot, had preserved the remnant. He always keeps a remnant, like he preserved Lot and his family. He would have destroyed the nation like he destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, all of the prophets except Ezekiel, Joel, Obadiah, and Jonah used the title Adonai Svaot, or God, the Lord of armies, the Lord of hosts, to stress that God had numberless assistants who were ready and able to carry out his bidding. Yeshua had said that he says, "Don't you think I could just pray and God would send me, the Father would send me 10 legions of angels, or 12 legions of angels?" And that's 12 legions, that's 120,000 angels to come at his beck and call. And so that's why he said he chose to lay down his life. No man took it from him. So God has, innumerable divine beings, angels that could come and do whatever. And so here, that's the meaning of the Lord of hosts. Okay, and so this is the first reference in Isaiah to the remnant, the faithful few in Israel, and they formed a distinct group within the apostate nation. So there's always somebody in Israel that were faithful. There were a faithful few, and so God would not ever destroy all of them. He would keep that remnant. And, as things get worse and worse in this world, I pray that we would be the remnant that is going to hold out the standard of holiness and righteousness in this crazy country of ours, certainly. And so I will go on to the next rather than getting into that. So, and there's the other things that I was talking about in the metaphor for health and in the destroyed land and the sukkah. Okay. All right. So going ahead to verse 10. Hear the word of Adonai, you rulers of Sodom. Give ear to the Torah of our God, you people of Gomorrah. For what is it to me, the multitude of your sacrifices, says Adonai? I am full of burnt offerings, of rams and fat of fed animals. I have no delight in the blood of bulls or of lambs or he-goats. When you come to appear before me, who has required this at your hand? Trampling my courts. Bring no more worthless offerings. Incense is an abomination to me. New moon and Shabbat, the calling of convocations. I cannot endure it. Iniquity with solemn assembly. Your new moons and your festivals my soul hates. They are a burden to me. I am weary to bear them. When you spread out your hands, I will hide my eyes before you. When you multiply prayers, I will not hear. Your hands are full of blood. Wash and make yourselves clean. Put away the evil of your deeds from before my eyes. Cease to do evil. Learn to do good. Seek justice. Relieve the oppressed. Defend the orphan and plead for the widow. So, that was a long one. Okay. The prophet laid out two alternatives for the people to choose from in relating to the Lord in their rotten condition that they were in. They could continue to rely on religious ritual to manipulate God, as he talked about that in verses 10 to 15, or they could change their ways and live morally and ethically pure lives. The choice was theirs. Now, these scriptures here, I have heard preachers talk about. God says he doesn't want any more of these sacrifices. He doesn't want any more of the rituals that the Jews do, and so that's why the modern day Christians, that we don't do any of that kind of stuff because God said he hates it. Well, I think they're taking it out of context there, and they miss the entire point that those rituals were ordained by God. The problem with it was that with the Jewish people, it had become just a ritual, and so he's moving into this idea here that we don't want to, that, let's see how to say that God ordained all of these things, but they no longer were mindless rituals. They'd gone through it so many times, and it's like the people, where the little, say, the nursery rhyme prayers that go, now I lay me down to sleep, I pray the Lord my soul to keep, and if I die, whatever, however that thing goes, I don't know. And so you just say it, or people will say a blessing at their meals, and it's the same one that they always say. And I try always, because we do a Hebrew blessing for our meals, and I always try to remember that what I am saying there is I'm blessing God for his provision of this meal that we're having, and I try to make sure that I always try to remember that, so that the people had taken these rituals and turned them into nothing more than just just ritual. It they were like Sodom and Gomorrah. They were evil. They did all sorts of things. There was all sorts of internecine schemes and murders and things like that the people did in Judah, in Israel, and up in northern kingdom, down the southern kingdom. And so both kingdoms were guilty of it. And so they thought, well, we're still doing that morning sacrifice. That we're doing that to meat offering in the morning and to meat offering in the evening, and the priests still get in there and they sing and so forth. So we're still good. Okay, Carmen?
Yes. Well, I believe they weren't worshiping. They were complacent. Being complacent, they just like, okay, let's hurry and get through this. The football game starts at 12 o'clock or whatever time football starts. Anyway, that kind of a thing,
Yeah. And, I think that we all can be guilty of that if we're not careful, that, our worship services have, you feel like, well, they have to be just this way. We have to sing this kind of song or that kind of song. And and the speaker has to, do this thing and that thing and so on and so forth. And if you don't, well, then that's just not right. And so, what they had done, they had taken the idea of their sacrifices and made it kind of cultish in a way, in that we're good as long as we can go through all of the liturgy just like we're supposed to, and we're good. It's and no repentance required. Just make sure that you got the form, but not the substance. You didn't need the substance as long as you got the form right. And so, and that's what Yeshua taught against a lot of times. He would come in and say, you're doing the everything, right by the book, but you're missing out on the spirit of the law, where, you are to be compassionate. You're supposed to take care of people and not just worry about how long your tzitzit are on the bottom of your garment and how, the width of your phylactery as you wrap it around your arm. And so that's one of the things that they were guilty of here. And so after telling them what he didn't want, what God didn't want, then he goes and tells them what they should do. And so he says, wash yourselves. Okay, well, what does that mean? Does that mean they were nasty and they should just go and take a bath, clean up, go dip in the mikvah? No, what he's talking about is wash yourselves, repent, that you're supposed to change your way. The Hebrew, teshuvah. You're supposed to turn around directly from your sin, what you were doing, and going back to God and doing the right thing. And it says, and that's what he's saying there. Stop sinning. Don't do that anymore. All these things that I see you doing, don't do it anymore. And that's what teshuvah means. It means 180-degree change in direction. If you were going toward bad things, you turn around and you head back toward God. And it said, learn to do good. Again, start teaching your children what is the correct and right thing to do. Every week we follow a pattern. It's okay. It's liturgy. It's ritual. But we say the ve'ahavta, which is instructions that you should bring the teaching of Torah to your children when they get up in the morning, when they during the day, when they go lie down at night, when you're traveling someplace. You're always teaching your children about the proper way to worship God and the proper way to walk in his statutes. And so that's what they're saying there. Learn to do good. Be fair in justice. One of the problems that Israel had there was a corrupt judicial system, okay? And we all know about corrupt judicial systems. And we, that's from firsthand knowledge. We can see that every day in this country and just about any country, that when you go before a judge, it's anybody's guess whether you're going to get justice or not. And so he's all throughout the Bible, God cautions his people, and especially the judges, to be fair, to do exactly what is called for, no more, no less. You don't give the rich guy a break because he's a rich guy and he's going to contribute to your campaign, and you don't do it the other way. Well, this rich guy, I don't even like him anyway. He doesn't contribute to my campaign. But this poor guy, that he says, I'll just give it to, I'll rule in favor of the poor guy just to get back at the rich guy, and rather than, okay, was the law broken? Yes, the law was broken, or the law was not broken, or whatever, but rule fairly according to the law. And all throughout the Bible, it's a commandment. It's to do justice. And so, one of the things that is just ubiquitous in Judaism, proper Judaism, is to relieve those who are downtrodden. It talks about taking care, being charitable, and you teach your children, like every Friday night you have a tzedakah box on the table, and you drop a few coins in the tzedakah box as a form of lesson to the children that we should be charitable. And it says, take up for the helpless. They're talking about the orphans here, that we should, orphans in those days, they didn't have orphanages. So if a kid's parents and relatives died, well, then the child had no options but either to starve to death or turn to crime. And so the Lord was saying, you take care of those orphans so that they can be raised up in the proper fashion and don't have to turn to crime or whatever just to be able to eat. And again, it talks about performing your civic duties. There were laws regarding how you took care of orphans and widows and those that were poor. You didn't kick a man when he was down. So anyway, any comments or questions on that?
I just thought it was interesting there because he said that unless God had left the remnant, we would have been like Sodom and Gomorrah. But you got to realize he's correcting these people. Because for the most part, even most of Judah even was corrupt. So he starts very next line says, and he says, "Hear the word of the Lord, rulers of Sodom. Give ear to the Torah, people of Gomorrah." He's dissing them. He's using Jewish sarcasm. This is, like I said, this part of that passion, the passion of this book. And you'll see it being used many times in this way. He's trying to get it through their thick heads. Hey, you know what? Wake up.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you're right about that. He does use sarcasm. He does use irony. And so that's one of the beauties about Isaiah, is that he does have these plays on words and all sorts of literary constructs that he's using, because Isaiah was obviously a very educated person with a very firm grasp of the Hebrew language with all of its nuances, and even to the point where today sometimes we don't get it, because we were not in that era. And there were probably nuances that we don't get today. But yeah, he was calling them, he said, well, of course, Sodom and Gomorrah had already been destroyed, centuries before that. And he's calling these, you rulers of Sodom, you rulers of Gomorrah. He's talking to the leaders of Jerusalem at that point. So exactly correct. So let's go. It says, come now, let us reason together, says Adonai. Though your sins be like scarlet, they will be white as snow. Though they be red like crimson, they will become like wool. If you are willing and obey, you will eat the good of the land. But if you refuse and rebel, you will be devoured with the sword, for the mouth of Adonai has spoken. So God is, he's asking the people to debate with them. Is the wisdom of, these two alternatives that we've got, okay? Where's the wisdom in this? Just sit down and tell me, if you do what I tell you to do, then you will be blessed. But if you don't, and if you disobey, you're going to die by the sword. Now, what is the wisdom? Where do you get, well, I'm going to keep on doing what I want to do because I want to die by the sword. He said, come on, let's be reasonable. Let's talk this out. And, I've over my lifetime, I've heard that those verses many, many times about, come now, let us reason together. And so I even, I've heard my father said that a few times. It says, well, he says, I think God wants us to use our brains, because he says, come, let us reason together. And instead of just kind of going our own way. So I've always liked that verses, but here he is saying, guys, think about it. What are you thinking? And if we put it in our vernacular today. So going ahead here, because I'm almost out of time. How the faithful city became a harlot. She once was full of justice. Righteousness lodged in her, but now murderers. Your silver has become dross, your wine diluted by water. Your princes are rebellious and friends with thieves. Everyone loves a bribe and chases after rewards. They do not defend the orphan, nor does a widow's case come to them. Here we go, the orphans and the widows again. So spiritual rot had penetrated, all throughout the land, and especially right there in the capital city of Israel, of Judah. And that, when he talks about Jerusalem, that meant the entire country. When a lot of times we will talk about a country, we'll say their either the name of their capital or the country itself. Well, Germany has done this today. Well, what has Germany done? Or Moscow has done, well, the streets of London today, something like that. And it meant and we'll say even, in Washington, D.C., that Washington has now decreed that, well, Washington, what? George Washington has been dead for years. So what are they talking about? They're talking about the government and the people as a whole. In this case, the Jerusalem characterized the people, and the people characterized Jerusalem. They were one and the same, because they were all they had all turned their back on the Lord, with the exception of a few and a remnant. Remember, they still had guys like Daniel and those his friends that were carried off into captivity, but they were saved, and they were useful in the captivity to still teach the people and to be faithful. So what was the glory of Jerusalem in those days? They had passed their glory days. Solomon, that was the peak of it right there. Was the temple, and they never again reached that height. And in their territories or whatever, none of the following kings were able to conquer the lands and hold them and have a country that Solomon had. So yeah, all of these glories, they're gone. And seemed like just as time went on, the stature of the nation of Israel and of Judah both, they just kept going down and down and down. They were getting further and further and further from God. And so to the point now where Israel is gone, Judah is still there, but it's on its way out. It's circling the drain. And so, and Isaiah is telling them, you know, this is what he said. Here's the reasons for this coming judgment. And basically he said, you know, you've played the harlot, you played the prostitute with idolatry and these false religions, and all of your riches. It says the silver would become dross. Well, what's dross? That's the impurities that are on top of silver when you're smelting it. And when you're purifying it, the impurities rise to the top. And what he's saying is all you got left is the impurities. The silver is gone. The goodness is gone. And the leadership of the nation of Judah and Jerusalem, they were nothing but rotten, corrupt thieves, and not a whole lot from modern day governments. And they were corrupt, and they didn't practice justice for widows or orphans. And you know that they I'm trying very hard not to just jump into political things here tonight, but you know what I'm talking about when we see things, court cases that you look at and says that's just wrong, that that person should have been vindicated, or that person should have been thrown in jail, but now they're back on the streets again. And we're seeing that a lot right now in these no bail states, and so no cash bail. Things are no bail at all, where criminals are right back on the street before the police can even finish their reports. Reminiscent of back in the days in the Coast Guard, where we could catch a doper, and before we could get our reports into the district office, those guys had already made bail and were on their way back to Columbia for another load. And very frustrating for a law enforcement officer, I can tell you. So let's go ahead, because we got to get through this. All right. Therefore, says the Lord Adonai Tzvaot, the mighty one of Israel, Oi, I will get my relief from my foes and avenge myself on my enemies. Then I will turn my hand on you, purge away your dross, and remove all your alloy. I will restore your judges as at first, your counselors as at the start. Afterwards, you will be called a city of righteousness, faithful city. All right, so it's kind of unusual there that we got a three-part name of God. He used actually what they use is the four-letter word that we don't pronounce. Well, we don't. Jewish people don't pronounce the four-letter word. Christians have the theologians have no problem with the word, and but anyway, we use the word Adonai. Okay, the Christians will use the word Yahweh. Well, we don't use that. So Adonai, which is a sovereign God, and then Lord of hosts, and that's the second one, and then mighty one of Israel. So he combined all of these three names and attributes of the Lord. And so basically what that does is just saying, okay, look out, Israel, here it comes. And so it just was not going to bode well for Israel at that point. But so he says, I'm going to take care of my enemies. Now, we've always heard that, in the way that this is written here, where it says, I will avenge myself on my, then I will turn my hand on you, purge away your dross, and remove all your alloy. Okay, now that verse there, verse 25, it can mean a couple of things. If you're looking at the Hebrew, it can mean, I'm gonna smash you guys flat, or it means I'm gonna turn back and turn my attention on you. This is, I will fix that dross. We'll take away that dross. We'll fix the alloy. In other words, we're going to make you pure again. And we're going to, he says, I will put in make sure that we have a just system. The judicial system is going to be correct, and you're going to be a city of righteousness. Now, I think it's fair to say that Jerusalem and Israel is not going to be that way until the Messiah comes and we have that in the millennial period. Okay, so that's a prophecy for a long time after Isaiah. So, here this idea where and I've heard it just this last week or week before that we must love the sinner and hate the sin. Very true. But at the same time, you got to let that sinner know that what they're doing is an abomination to God, and there is going to come a day of reckoning. There will be a payday, and God just does not put up with some of the stuff that's going on in this world today, and not, and I say this world, I mean this world, the planet Earth, with some of the debauchery that's going on, and just things that God calls an abomination. And so those kind of people that practice that, they're going to reap what they sow. And we'll just leave it at that, because I want to finish this off tonight. Verse 27, Zion will be redeemed with justice, her repentant with righteousness. But there will be a crushing of transgressors and sinners together. Forsaking Adonai, they will be consumed. For they will be ashamed of the sacred oaks that you desired, and embarrassed of the gardens, because of the gardens that you have chosen. For you will be like an oak of withering leaf, like a garden that has no water. So the strong will become tender, and his work like a spark. Both will burn together, and no one will quench them. So God is saying here, this is kind of he's using Zion. He says Zion will be redeemed. Well, Zion is it's a poetic synonym for Jerusalem. Okay, and it says they will experience redemption by God's justice and righteousness. The Lord will destroy individuals who continue to do their sins and do not repent. Okay, that's what I've mentioned before, that, we can love the sinner, but if you're going to love them, you got to tell them that, that kind of behavior is going to mean your eternal separation from God. And so this is the first occurrence of the word redeemed and Zion in Isaiah. Okay. And both, they will receive a lot of attention in the book of Isaiah as we go about it. So it says the Israelites had turned to objects of idolatry, the oaks. They'd taken the trees and cut them down and turned them into idols, and places of idolatry, the gardens where they'd put statues, minarets, or whatever they were on these high places, and in so doing, they had forsaken God. And so God had chosen Israel, but Israel had chosen a tree. And so it's impossible to turn from the true God and not turn to an idol. So God's people would feel betrayed because of their choice one day. They will look and say, oh man, we blew it. What were we thinking? And those who consider themselves strong now, and he's talking about in Israel, in Jerusalem at the time, he says, those of you that think yourself strong and like an oak and all these gardens, okay, well, you're going to be nothing. You're going to wither, you're going to dry up, and you'll just end up being firewood. And that's so anyway, that is chapter 1 of Isaiah.